Today on the show, we're going to talk about some of the worst humans in all of sci-fi. Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and universes of our favorite video games. I'm Kevin.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Jaden.
All right, guys. So today we were going to talk about Cerberus. I know you guys were talking about this with me a couple weeks ago. We were talking to Connor, you've been playing Mass Effect yourself lately.
Slowly but surely, chipping away at I'm on Mass Effect 2 right now. I've played 1 and haven't touched 3 yet, so I know I'm going to be missing some context here. I'm going to be leaning on you guys to fill in the gaps for me, but yeah, excited to talk Cerberus, especially as a follow-up to our conversation about Ashley last time.
I think that the conversation that we had last time will lead beautifully into this one, because this is almost like a other side of the coin scenario here. It's another path that could have been traveled for Ashley's life, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been playing 1 now, replaying it, and it's just so crazy to see like Cerberus and just like kind of their journey in the games, because they themselves are kind of a character as an organization. And because honestly, what we're going to really be talking about here is kind of how, you know, most villains, they don't really see themselves as the villain, right? Like villains are always kind of, they think they're doing something, you know, good in their eyes. And so in Cerberus's eyes, they kind of care so much for humanity that like fighting against what they think is, you know, their alien rulers and all this stuff will free humanity and then kind of create like a galactic society where humanity can thrive. And like that's like their whole kind of spiel. And we see them completely differently in a completely different perspective in Mass Effect 1. But then in Mass Effect 2, we kind of join them. So it's a whole different lens that we view them with. So I think the whole argument of what they are is, I don't want to say it's a gray area, but it's just kind of interesting to see like an internal perspective rather than from the outside, you know?
Right. They kind of take on different shapes throughout the series. Like you said in the first game, they're in the background. Yep. You only really get references to them throughout the first game, but they seem like a, you know, fringe radicalist faction, you know, working in humanity's best interest, or at least what they think humanity's best interest is. And then, yeah, we get a more nuanced look at them in Mass Effect 2. Like, you kind of get a feel for how people like Jacob, Miranda, whoever, how do they buy into the Cerberus mission? What appeals to them about it? And I think that's important. Like, exploring that kind of thing is important for understanding why Cerberus does what it does, how it got started. And then maybe we can get into where it all went wrong and maybe Mass Effect 3 or down the road. But yeah, it's kind of like, what's their side of the story? What were they attempting to do? And
why are you the way you are?
Exactly.
Yeah. And exactly. I mean, thinking about, you know, there's always a message when you join an organization or a group or something. There's always like a theme or a message that people rally to. That's the reason why they join. So it's gonna be kind of cool to see everything and kind of why these people are joining Cerberus and what's their backing and you know, what's their history. So I mean, Jaden, I figure we'll start it off. I mean, you're a knowledgeable Mass Effect person. What is Cerberus?
The organization itself is kind of an offshoot of other political groups. They're more of an organization that focuses on the betterment of humanity, but by any means necessary. Where other organizations and political groups try to make themselves seem strong, you know, through the legal system, they're more of like, imagine if like your favorite lobbyist group also had a black ops unit. Like imagine if an oil company also had a guy who would sneak in and plant the illegal documents himself.
You mean they don't?
There you go.
I mean, you know, that's fair, but I like to pretend we live in a world where we don't have that. Unfortunately, who knows? Their whole goal is to make sure that humanity is first, no matter the cost. Right. And I think that's where that last part, no matter the cost, it kind of gets in there where you're like, yeah, but doesn't everything have a cost? Some parallels that you could draw between the two organizations is from another sci-fi universe of Star Trek, with Section 31, where they're a small, tiny organization attached but not officially attached to the heroes faction, if you will, and they're you don't want to root for them because their methods are considered dirty compared to the more clean cut protagonist that you play as.
Right.
All right. So that's the gist of it, but let's kind of delve in a little bit deeper here. I guess we'll say, like, what's their starting point? Like, what happened to create Cerberus? So in the early time of humans, interacting with alien species for Mass Effect, it wasn't great. It was, one would say it was very violent. The first fights broke out, and honestly, the whole thing, the first contact war, that's what humanity calls it. It was just a misunderstanding. Humans, they were just going around the galaxy activating mass relays, without a thought, and then they didn't know galactic rules, and they didn't know that they're not supposed to do that. They didn't know about the Rachni. They didn't know about anything.
Hey, there's no parking here after 9, and then they started a war.
Literally, yeah. Literally, that's basically
the Turians came to give us a parking ticket, and the shooting started immediately.
And pulled out a Magnum.
Yeah.
It was a traffic violation, a galactic traffic violation. That's what the First Contact War was. So now we have the First Contact War, and with that already had aggressive relations with other species as humanity was, new to the community, and its first experience was not that great. It was just aggression. That was humanity's first experience with other aliens, and the First Contact War was the first step in kind of like a stairway that led to Cerberus. It was viewed as like a minor conflict to all these other species, but to humanity, I mean, it was like one of the biggest things ever. It was a big deal, and I mean, rightly so. Like they got their shit rocked.
Yes.
And the only reason it was okay at the end, well, I say okay, the only reason it ended, if you will, was because the council was like, hey, none of that. And that was basically it.
Yeah.
Which is actually, it brings up a very good point, because I don't know, when you play through the games, you don't really see any other factions having an organization as big as Cerberus. And I think that mostly comes down to the fact that humanity was blindsidedly thrown into this conflict. I don't know if that's a phrase, but I like to believe it is. And I think that, humanity, I jokingly say we watched too many alien movies, and then we realized aliens were real. We were like, oh shit, somebody's got to do something about this.
Yeah, I think the experience of losing the first interstellar war, well, encountering aliens, losing a war against them, and then finding out that there's a government of these aliens who suddenly impose their will upon us, that's a lot of really big paradigm shifts happening all at once. Like back to back, humanity just, having to realign their entire reality like several times. That's going to put people in a very defensive, almost paranoid mood, I think. So
yeah.
An organization like Cerberus is inevitable from that kind of circumstance, I think.
So especially as it's like the first experience for the introduction kind of to the galactic community, do you guys think the First Contact War would have led to like a different outcome had the Citadel taken it like more seriously, like right off the bat?
I think the thing you have to understand is the introduction to this new alien society was going to be jarring and upsetting, regardless of whether or not shots were fired before they were introduced. I think you got to remember, humanity as a species, we like things to stay the same. Change is a scary thing, and this is literally the biggest change you could possibly have. Humanity goes from being alone and by itself to being a very, very small player in a very big world. All of a sudden, the politicians and the senators who had all this power as being, the senator of, North America, all of a sudden they watch over a small pond, compared to what the chairman of the Turian Empire might have.
Yeah.
Their power, which honestly, that might be where a lot of Cerberus's anger comes from, is from politicians who feel like they don't have any power anymore. So they had to find a way to build an organization that maybe makes them feel strong again, because they are so small in this new galaxy.
Exactly. And just to add to that, I think even like hypothetically, to answer your question, Kevin, I think if you had a hypothetical situation where instead of the Turians just opening fire on human explorers immediately and starting the First Contact War, I think if instead of that happening, like a council liaison, representing the Asari, the Turians, the Solarians, whoever, kind of like as a group approached humanity and said, hey, nice to meet you. By the way, we need you to go ahead and stop activating Mass Effect relays because that's kind of not cool, and here's why. We'll explain to you why. I think if that had happened as like a peaceful overture, the First Contact War might have been avoided. And I think humanity might have entered the Citadel community on a better footing. But even if you had all that, I think you still would have a lot of mistrust among certain elements of the Systems Alliance. Like there would still be humans who would feel vulnerable and powerless and just, suspicious of these new civilizations that we're suddenly kind of answering to on some level or another. So, yeah, I mean, things could have been a lot different, but I think you would still have people gravitating toward a message like Cerberus's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be as jarring as you think, Jaden, because if humanity is already on other planets and is expanding, I think that the mindset of we're bound to find something eventually is already there. But I do think that, Connor, you're right. Like, if it was less aggression in the beginning, I think it would have been more excitement and acceptance. But still, obviously, very much like there would obviously be suspicion. Because after the First Contact War, propaganda was just all over the place with humanity. And I still think that would still happen. Like they had all this like fear of human genocide and, all the information circles for humanity. Like that was their biggest thing. Like all of a sudden a manifesto was created, and that was by the Elusive Man at the time. And that was kind of what sparked Cerberus. And I think the initial spark was the First Contact War and how it was handled. I do think it would eventually still be a slow burn if there wasn't, but this was like all on like fire like in 2 seconds.
I mean, the best example that I can think of to counter your point there is the planet Pluto. Notice I said planet because I still believe that Pluto is a planet.
Weird hill to die on, but okay.
Now imagine if you were to tell me Pluto is not only not a planet, but populated by aliens. I think I'd have some things to say about that.
There you go.
And that's just how humanity is. It's like we think something and we accept it the way we want to believe it is rather than what it actually is. And humans being suddenly told, oh, you're not the most powerful thing in the galaxy. Actually, you're not even one of the top 10. Have you met the Geth?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Jaden, that does demonstrate just how insignificant humanity suddenly was on the galactic scale. Like we've touched on before, like on last episode and already on this one, just driving home how important it is to know that humanity's place in the galaxy completely changed overnight. So we're not the big man on top anymore. We're in this whole new dynamic of having to cooperate with the Citadel species. And and as you mentioned, Kevin, with Cerberus propaganda starting to circulate, like just sort of that's where they got their start, really, like at the grassroots level of, hey, here's a flyer, don't trust the aliens. But it eventually escalated, didn't it, to more than propaganda at a certain point.
Yeah. I mean, humanity, that's the thing. Like, all of a sudden, we're a young species. We don't know as much as we think. We're the new guy on campus. And, that's scary. And so, we played on that fear. And then it became not just propaganda. Then Cerberus attacked Citadel Space. And it was like a whole thing. And it was viewed as a terrorist attack. To Cerberus, they were showing that they did not, they didn't have to abide by their new oppressors' rules or anything like that. But that to them, everybody else, it was a terrorist attack.
Thank God they considered it a terrorist attack too, because could you imagine the entire galaxy just turning around and stomping on humanity? It's like, no. And honestly, there would have been precedent for them to do that because they've encountered hostile species and just like the last time they didn't snuff them out immediately, they regretted it. So it's very surprising that they didn't launch a harsh reprisal against America, humanity.
Yeah, I think everyone alive in the Mass Effect universe owes their existence to the Citadel deciding not to just genocide people because what Cerberus did. So that's a good point. I never thought of that before.
Yeah. I mean, Cerberus sees as a new organization, now they are more powerful than their, big galactic rulers. Like, that's their whole thing, is they just felt like oppressed and that they were going to be, controlled as humans. Humanity was going to be controlled by the Citadel, and it was no more free will for humans. You have to abide by these rules, and you don't have a say. They're already set in stone. That's the other thing, is like humanity, we've created our own rules as we've gone, and now all of a sudden we're just thrown at this new world that has all these new rules that we didn't have a say in. So that's kind of like, you get this weird oppressive feeling.
Yeah, it's basically the plot of Batman v Superman. It's just aliens show up and you don't trust them, and you just assume that they're going to oppress you at some point. So you decide to take them out first.
So is the elusive man Lex Luthor then?
No, he's Batman, I think. He's Bruce Wayne.
The elusive man is way cooler than that version of what's his name, Lex Luthor. Jesse Eisenberg is terrible, but that's another tangent for another night.
Now, we did mention the elusive man. That's
Who is the elusive man? Is he a man or just an illusion, as his name suggests?
He's so damn elusive, man.
That's the thing, like, as far as I've played, he's just some guy who just kind of shows up and introduces you to, I guess his place in the story, or at least as far as I can tell, is he represents the ideal of Cerberus. He kind of like is there to put a soft touch on it. Like, he shows up and says, "Hello, Commander Shepard. You may have heard of me and my movement. You've probably heard some slander against me. You've maybe heard me labeled a terrorist, but let me assure you, I simply have humanity's best interests at heart." And that's kind of like his whole deal. It's kind of like,
please ignore the casual genocide that I wish to impose upon the galaxy, and just remember that I'm a good guy.
Try to see the positives of this bombing I tried to pull off on the Citadel and things like that.
By the way, I definitely did illegal experiments to bring you back from the freaking dead.
Yeah, really. That's another thing.
Yeah, I mean,
ethics be damned.
We're not going to make this episode,
Yeah, this is not an episode about the elusive man, but he I think he does represent something interesting about Cerberus. It's kind of like that.
He's the most quantifiable version of Cerberus that we could discuss. If Cerberus was a person, he would be the thing we would talk about, which is why we bring a lot about him up. But it's not all about him, because sometimes he makes selfish decisions that are more in line with his personal beliefs than of Cerberus itself or even humanity.
All right, we're going to keep this conversation going, but first, a quick break.
Well, that's an evolving thing, because he did create Cerberus, so it is kind of his baby brainchild thing. But then I think Cerberus grows so much to where I don't want to say it's out of his control, but it definitely starts to evolve. You have so many different factions within Cerberus that there's just a lot going on. And obviously that's why he created kind of like a feudal, system of like hierarchy. But again, we're not gonna talk about him that much, because this is about the organization as a whole, not just one person. But Cerberus is, the word Cerberus, it's a gatekeeper, the guardian of humanity. So that's kind of like a thing in terms of the naming and everything. And once we meet him, just like what Connor said, like, we realize that he doesn't hate other species, because he works with a bunch of other species. He doesn't have like hatred towards other species. He just wants to secure humanity's like dominance. And in his own manifesto that was released, he kind of sparked the rise of Cerberus. That was his whole thing. But he didn't really say to hate other species. It was more of like humanity should be in charge of humanity kind of thing. Just like what Connor said, like, you meet him and he's trying to say like, hey, like, look on the positive side, look at this, look at that. Again, another aspect of like a villain being like, sure, these things are necessary to be done, but I have all these good intentions. I'm not a bad guy, trust me. So I don't know, Connor, you've met him now. Like, you've actually met him. My personal view, like, my question to you is like, did meeting him kind of change your view of Cerberus and like of him? And like, because my thing is, when I got to actually experience Cerberus in Mass Effect 2, it kind of changed how, for a lack of a better term, it almost humanized them. It just kind of made me kind of understand, like, yeah, right? Like, I kind of got to see their backgrounds and like these people that I'm fighting with and everything, and why they're where they are, almost like an anime episode. You're meeting these characters and you're understanding them better than just like a blank slate of like, Cerberus, Cerberus, Cerberus. alliance. Like you see why they pick their paths. So I'm curious as to like after you meet him and like now that you've met some people in Cerberus, what do you think?
It did make me appreciate the idea that everyone has their reasons and everyone is kind of like the protagonist of their life. And so it made me appreciate the idea that when the Citadel doesn't center humanity's interests, like if things are like, you know, like at the beginning of Mass Effect 2, humans are being abducted and no one's really doing much about it. The Citadel's not really doing much about it. It does make me appreciate like, well, someone has to do something about it. And Cerberus is able to, and they're willing to, so they're going to. So it's like kind of like they're doing what no one else will do. They're sticking up for humanity when no one else will. There is a nobility to that. But you get that slippery slope of that. You know, we come back to what you said, Kevin, is just, you know, their goal is furthering humanity's goals at all costs. And
I was about to say, like the message is always humanity first, but then you say, well, what about the rest of them? And they go, the rest of them.
That's another thing.
You know, there's no consideration for what the other races' roles would be. If humanity's first, what happens to the rest of them?
Yeah, that's another thing about.
There's no real plan in place for. There's no step 2. There's always step 1, which is we become rulers of the galaxy. But then step 2 is like, we continue to be in charge. And it's like, well, that's not a sustainable 12-step plan there.
Step 1, gain power. Step 2, retain power. Yeah. But that does make me think of like, is Cerberus's goal to achieve a dominant position in the galaxy for humans, or is it just to make sure that humans are able to remain independent, self-sufficient, like not ruled by anyone else? And is there like leeway there? Do they kind of go for both sometimes? It's hard to tell.
The problem with that question that you posit is that the galaxy they exist in does not allow for them to be an independent, you know, organization anymore. You know, humanity has to be a part of the greater galaxy or they will die. And I think Cerberus hasn't really caught on to that yet. They think that humanity can be strong on its own. And it's that way of life does not exist anymore. It stopped existing, you know, the second the Turians showed up and said, hey, who are these idiots with guns?
Yeah, it's almost like there's kind of a paradox to Cerberus where they want humans to be completely self-sufficient and like the captains of their destiny and whatnot. Like they want humans to call the shots for humans. Like no one else makes decisions for us but us.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that is, you know, like you explained, Jaden, like that isn't really possible when you consider the Citadel is a factor. Like you have to deal with the Citadel, and you throw into the mix the fact that Cerberus will work with aliens when they need to. Like they will cooperate with non-humans when the situation calls for it. So it's almost like, what actually is your goal then? Like if you don't want to be part of the Citadel community, but you still want to work with aliens when it suits you, it's kind of like, well, where are your principles then? Like where's the line? Yeah.
It's very similar to I make parodies all the time to the fascist ideology. You know, fascist ideology, when you look at it compared to the rest of the world, it doesn't actually work because the only way fascism survives is when you have a constant enemy to struggle against.
Exactly, yeah.
And once humanity is on top, what are we going to do next?
Right.
You know, there was no step 2 once fascism became the dominant ideology, if it had ever happened. You know, it was going to collapse under its own weight at a certain time anyway. So humanity, if it ever became the strongest factor in that galaxy, would definitely have just fallen apart due to complacency or due to some other factor. You know, it's not gonna. Humanity was just too small to control the galaxy.
Right.
You know, it's a sad fact for them, but it's true. You know, the Turians have, you know, hundreds of worlds. The Asari have hundreds of worlds. They have billions more people. You know, they've just been a part of the galaxy longer.
Yeah.
And they've had the room to grow.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, like I said earlier too, you have all these rules that are already created as soon as humanity is there. Like we didn't have a say in everything. And so now there's a system, there's a human system of like government, like, you know, the system is what I mean. Like, you know, you have this world with rules made by humanity. And then now you have this other world of rules, this galactic rule set that we didn't even have a say in. So it's when you meet these people, not just the elusive man now you're meeting other people in the organization, you kind of get to know them and you kind of get to see that they're there because in some way they were failed by the current system.
Yes,
and
exactly. Yeah.
Whether it be the human system, the current human system, or the current galactic system, they were failed by a system. And Cerberus was the one that was like, hey, I will help you. And to them, they see Cerberus as like, hey, this system is working for me and it can work for other people. And I can see other people struggling in the current systems and I can see how terrible it is for them. And so I'm going to join this one and I'm going to try to, I'm going to try to help these people that are not in Cerberus. I want them to be a part of Cerberus. And that's the thing is nobody ever, again, like I said earlier, nobody ever sees themselves as the villain. They see themselves as trying to help. It's just how are you being perceived? Like this situation. Now, personally, Cerberus, asshole. I'm going to just throw it out there like, organization, I'm not advocating for Cerberus. No, I will say to them, they don't see it that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think like what I was getting at, it was a roundabout answer to your original question, Kevin, of like what meeting the members of Cerberus tells you as a player. And that is like, even as Jaden and I, we hashed out just now, is like, even if the long-term goals of Cerberus don't all add up, and even if it's kind of an unsustainable project of, humanity needs to stand alone, even if there's like kind of a dead end at the end of that road, the moment-to-moment values that Cerberus represents is still very attractive to a lot of people, and many of those people become close companions to us as the player, like Miranda, Jacob, and everyone else. And we kind of get to know like what's the appeal here, and I think we've hit on that, is that a system failed you. The Citadel doesn't look out for you. The Human Systems Alliance seems kind of incompetent. Like, no one seems to be centering your concerns as a human being in the modern galaxy. And especially when the collectors show up, like, then, holy shit, like, who else is going to help you? And yeah, like you said, Kevin, Cerberus represents itself. We are the alternative to all of that. And that's very attractive. Like, I can see the appeal there. And no one's going to be in that position of receiving a helping hand from Cerberus and think these guys are the bad guys, because that's not what they look like.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at Shepard, for instance, how do they, how as Shepard working with Cerberus, how do they appeal to Shepard? Like, that's the whole thing, is like,
they save his life for one. His or her, sorry.
Okay, sure. You brought me back from the dead, but like even then, Shepard's kind of like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, why am I here? Like, I don't want to help you. And so
you're paying off your elaborate medical bill, you idiot. That's right. American healthcare survived into the future, and you must suffer from it.
And that's the thing. The system sucks, guys. The current system ain't cracking it for Shepard. And that's the whole thing. Like, Cerberus, they eventually even help Shepard prove that the Reapers are real. Like they believe them. They believe Shepard. They are like, hey, the Reapers are a real thing. We want to help you. And the current system, the Citadel, doesn't want to hear it.
Fighting a war doesn't seem like Cerberus. Why are you involved?
We're committed to the advancement and preservation of humanity. If the Reapers are targeting us, trying to wipe us out, Cerberus will stop them. If we wait for politicians or the Alliance to act, no more human colonies will be left.
Even though they saw a Reaper at they saw the Reaper, they fought a Reaper at the end of Mass Effect 1, and they're still like, we got one, we defeated it. It can't be that bad.
Kevin, that was a whole 5 minutes ago. Who can remember that far back?
Yeah, what? I don't know. But that's the thing, like, this places the organization itself, Cerberus, in a really good light with the galactic community, like helping prove the Reapers are a threat, and kind of overshadows the galactic government. And like they start gaining like a lot more power. They start like having bigger ships and bigger stations in Citadel space, and they don't get messed with. Like they're just there now, and they're now the big guys. Like it's a catalyst improving the weakness and lack of action of the Citadel itself. And they already had like, all these companies and other kind of forms of income and stuff, but now like they had to hide from, you know what I mean? Like it was like secret companies that would funnel in money to Cerberus, but now they just partnered with the first Human Spectre and they did it. They did what the Citadel couldn't do. And so Cerberus, they were able to kind of operate like in the open a little bit more. And it kind of, I think that's crazy that they were able to not necessarily just shadow, but they were able to kind of like push aside the galactic government and kind of like be almost a quote beacon of hope, if you will, for not just humans. They started getting other species on their side because they were like, hey, look, I live in the galaxy. I like living in the galaxy. The Reapers don't like me living in the galaxy. The Citadel government, they say they like me living in the galaxy, but they're not doing anything for me. But Cerberus, they're doing something for me, and I live in the galaxy. I like it here. So I don't know about you, but who would I choose? That's kind of how these other factions and species and stuff are starting to feel, because the Citadel just didn't do shit.
I mean, I think any politician will tell you, like, the easiest way to gain support and votes is to tangibly impact people's lives in a positive way. Like when you show up for people, when you do something for them, they're going to remember that. And like it's interesting how, we've talked about how Cerberus sort of presented itself early on, but now it's going through this big change of coming out of the shadows into the public, into the light. And they're no longer a clandestine spy ring, basically. They're almost a pseudo government of their own. They are a big kid on the block. They're a major player. My question, though, is, Kevin and Jaden, how does that change them? Where does Cerberus go from there? Do they maintain that mission of serving humanity, or do they take a turn? Because I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, sure. I have a counter question for Jaden then. So even you too.
No, I mean me.
Okay.
I think?
Shut up, Connor. It's my time.
Where do they go from here? I mean, I think that depends, because like helping Shepard and helping fight the Collectors and prove that the Reaper, because it's not just to fight the Collectors, it's also to prove that the Reapers are a threat and they are here and they're coming and they're ready to kill us. Do you think that that's only to help humanity or just everyone as a whole? Because Cerberus does see other species as a way to help humanity, and they do work with the crew for Shepard's crew is not just only human, and even the Elusive Man was like, yeah, that's fine. Okay. And that's the thing is, like, do you think it's to help humanity, or do you think like doing all this stuff to try to prove the Reapers, Collectors, all that, do you think that's for the entire community? Because no matter what, it's going to affect both.
Here's what I'm going to say here. The Cerberus that we meet in Mass Effect 2 is not the Cerberus that we see before or since. The Cerberus that was created by the Elusive Man on the ship of the Normandy 2 is a version that the Elusive Man thought would be appealing to Shepard. He grabbed people and personnel that he thought were not his hardcore, faithful. They were guys that he felt Shepard would be comfortable with. And the big issue that you have with that is, Cerberus's goal at the beginning of Mass Effect 2 is to investigate why human colonies are being attacked. The fact that they were being used to build a human Reaper, that was more of a happy coincidence for Cerberus. They were like, see, it is connected to the Reapers. That was kind of like a baited question that he threw to Shepard, where he was like, yeah, hey, some weird things are happening. Is it related to the Reapers? I don't know. Maybe you should look into that. Here's a ship. Because the whole time Elusive Man is trying to convince Shepard that Cerberus is the right organization for him to follow and that he's in the right, which is why, of course, he doesn't say anything when Shepard's like, well, I want to bring in my alien crew. I mean, there's even moments when you talk, like when Garrus or any of the others join the crew and you talk to some of the human Cerberus crewmates, they're like, oh, I don't know about how I feel about serving with a Turian. My grandfather fought in the war, and it's like, ooh, yeah, these are the guys that, like, they're the nice version of Cerberus, but they're still Cerberus. They don't necessarily entirely trust the aliens that are aboard their ship.
I think I see exactly what you mean. And I was going to say something similar, actually, Jaden, is that, my take on why Cerberus would work in the interests of non-humans is it comes back to, I think that's an ulterior thing. That's an ulterior motive. I think that it's not Cerberus's goal to help aliens. Definitely. That's kind of like the opposite of their goal. But I think the Elusive Man is, pragmatic enough, and he thinks enough steps ahead to know that, if you gain allies in, among the Turians and the Asari and the Krogans, Solarians, whoever, if you gain allies among other species, that can only help humanity. So it's, even if it looks like he's helping aliens, he's really doing it to help humans. So it's
absolutely, and they are means to an end. They are not his friends.
Not just me here sitting nodding my head the entire time. I definitely think that you guys are right. Like, I think he sees them as like other species as tools, rather than individuals and like, sentient creatures, if you will. And that's the thing. Like post Mass Effect 2, I actually titled this part "A Road Too Dark for Light" because I really think that it just shows the pathway that they go down. And it's so bad that it's like any good that was there is just fizzled out, gone.
I feel that the Cerberus that you see in Mass Effect 3 is Cerberus in its truest and purest form.
Really?
They are not even pretending to care about other species anymore. They are fully unleashed on a galaxy that is in chaos. They are like, in their minds, the Reapers are the way that they're cleansing the galaxy and paving the way. They've leveled the playing field for their faction to rise. The Turians and the Asari are too busy fighting the Reapers to worry about us. Now it's time for us to take the power. And we're going to use our new tools to do that.
See, I see them kind of as an organization going from like helping to expose the Reapers and like, the weaknesses of the Citadel to fighting against, the Alliance and then Shepard. Like that, they went from fighting the Collectors, who were also they were part of the Reaper collective, if you will. They were killing humans. They were destroying human colonies. All of a sudden, it's like, I don't mind about that. Don't worry about it. We fixed that part. Like, no, what the hell? Like, you went from that to aligning with that. Like, I feel like that, like, obviously, like, there's indoctrination involved and there's a bunch of other shit, but like, I just think that you have to take that into account. Because, like, obviously thinking, like, oh, I can control the Reapers. I can bring humanity as the sole rulers of the galaxy. Like, I understand that as, like, their thought process of, like, humans first kind of thing. But it doesn't make sense unless you factor in, like, any type of indoctrination. Because that, like, why would they try to, I don't want to say align themselves, but, like...
It's pure hubris, Kevin. It's just, like, it's the idea that the Elusive Man believes that he's so powerful that he can control a billion-year-old entity that has done this. I mean, if you think about how many thousands of times has an alien species risen up from the dirt and said, I can control the Reapers.
Yeah.
I understand this well. Like, this is literally a cycle that has gone on for millennium. And so this is not the first time that someone has drank his own Kool-Aid and then drank the Reaper Kool-Aid and thought, oh yeah, I got this. I can totally control not only them, but myself in the process.
Yeah.
The whole theme here is no one thinks they're the villain. Everyone thinks they have more control than they do. And there's that trope of always assuming you're the exception. Like Jaden said, like there have been eons and eons of species or individuals thinking this time it'll be different.
But it might work for us.
It might work for us. And yeah, it's like, it's also that old adage of you can just change things from the inside. If you go to, where the action is, where the bad guys are doing the bad stuff, and you join them, and you can change what they do from the inside, it usually doesn't work that way. So I think, Cerberus is another classic example of starting out with great intentions, or at least understandable intentions, and kind of falling into that trap of, the intoxication of power and thinking that you're the exception. So... and eventually you lose the point of what you wanted to do in the first place. Like, they wanted to avoid humanity being dominated, and they end up being a dominating force upon humanity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, well, I think towards the end, the Elusive Man basically was like, well, somebody has to be king of the ashes, and it might as well be me.
Yeah. So Jaden, how do you think that? I mean, you kind of already said it, but if they didn't. So we were talking Mass Effect 2, now we're on 3. If Cerberus, wasn't indoctrinated and all this other shit, like, how do you feel they would have fared post Reaper? Obviously, we don't have, like, Mass Effect 4 is not out yet, but how do you feel Cerberus would be if that didn't happen post, like, Reaper War?
Honestly, at best, they would have been ostracized from every manner of society. This is one major factions that not only did not help us, but it actively worked against us.
Oh, no. I mean, if they didn't get indoctrinated and they still were...
I mean, that if they're not indoctrinated, they're not Cerberus. That's the problem you come into.
Mm.
Cerberus themselves, they're an organization that is based off of humanity being dominant, and that they shot their shot and they failed.
Yeah.
They failed hard. Shepard himself put them down. I don't think that the organization of Cerberus can exist without the indoctrination. I think the Cerberus believing that humanity must come first is their way of life. That is their core belief and their core reason for being. And I think if you take that away from them, they're nothing more than a social club.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
So then I guess Connor, like, do you think, like, similarly, like, do you think, like, Cerberus is always doomed to fail? Like, that's the thing. Like, do you guys think Cerberus was doomed from the beginning?
Yes, I think that that Cerberus represents the last vestiges of old world thinking. They believe that the world could go back to the soft, comfortable world that they are used to when that world died 40 years ago when the first Turians arrived. They are clinging to the belief that they can be special in a world full of special people, and that no longer is an option for them. And the realization came very hard and very fast when they thought they could control ancient beings with unlimited power, and it blew up in their faces quite literally.
I can't disagree with that. My only thought on top of that would just be that I think even if they never tried to control the Reapers, even if they just sort of maintained their course and they stayed in the shadows, so to speak, or maybe they help expose the Reapers in Mass Effect 2 and they help Shepard bring light to this crisis. But even if they'd never gotten too big for their britches and their reach exceeded their grasp as badly as it did, even if none of that happened, I think you'd still run into the problem of Cerberus fracturing and sort of disintegrating due to a difference in goals, I think, or a difference in philosophies. I think when you have people who are idealistic and join Cerberus with sort of a noble intentions of I just want to help my people, I just want to make sure someone's looking out for the human colonies that are being abducted and whatnot. When you have those people eventually butt up against the actual human supremacists who maybe joined Cerberus and truly do drink the Kool-Aid that humans are superior and need to rule the galaxy, you're going to have conflict. And I think Cerberus would eventually have just torn themselves apart anyway, even if they hadn't tried to control the Reapers.
That's absolutely, and I'm going to leave you with one final point, gentlemen. If Cerberus's goal truly was just making sure humanity was on top, it would have disbanded when humanity took over the Citadel Council.
Yeah.
That's literally the ultimate power in the galaxy of humans being in charge of galactic affairs. Their job is done. Well, yeah, guys, I think that about wraps it up. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us grow the show, and we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at lore_party. And check out our YouTube page for bonus videos and highlights. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you in the galaxy next time.